to be the first day of Python. You may wonder, okay, well, we've done Excel, we've done SQL, we've done Tableau, we've done Looker Studio. Why do we need Python? So Python is actually a very versatile tool because Excel actually has a limit to what you can use with it. So the limit for Excel is about 1 million rows, and I think column-wise it might be about 16,000 columns. So if you have larger data sets, which frequently happens, then you're not going to be able to analyze them in Excel. So this is where we turn to things like SQL, but remember SQL is more like querying. So we're trying to gain some information from a database that exists already. But with Python, we can still use these large databases and still manipulate them how we want to. We can do data analysis, we can do data visualization, so we can make graphs and things like this. We can do computational analysis, we can do machine learning. So Python really, I feel like it does it all. So let's get you all started into the amazing world of Python. So we're of course going to have everyone starts off with their Hello World program. So we're going to start with this in a moment. But before we do that, I just want to introduce you to the terminal. The terminal is going to be a little bit different than what we're used to. You'll see right here, this is the terminal we're going to be calling our commands into. And if you actually are using your computer, if you wanted to, not right now, but later on, if you download Python, your computer has this terminal as well that you can call Python functions to. So this terminal here you have on your computer as well, and it's really just kind of an interface. It's not anything special. Python is going to be the thing that's special. So let's see. And just in case, this is more for if you're using Python on your computer, you have to specify a specific version of Python. So sometimes if you're calling Python, you may have multiple versions of it because we have Python 2 and we have Python 3. So sometimes if you're running this on your own computer, you're going to have to call the specific version and not just calling Python. But if you're doing this on Codio with me, then we're just going to call it with Python. So just kind of a little bit of an aside. So let's understand just how we actually build the code, because this is going to be kind of a different realm than what we're used to with Excel, Tableau, and SQL. So we're going to have variables and values. So just kind of like going back to arithmetic, when you have your variables, which are usually some type of letter, and then you have values that you assign to those variables. So the values are going to be a piece of data. So it's data that you want to do something with. Of course, these can be numbers, and I think if you're thinking about arithmetic, it's going to be numbers most of the time. However, it's not limited to numbers. It can be text, which we're going to call string. It can be true or false values, which we call Boolean, and it can be a lot of different things. So just remember that your value is going to be some type of data that we're going to do something with later on. Those are going to be your values. So just remember, values are not limited to just numbers. So let's just look at this, and we're going to do this a little bit. We're going to do a lot with our different data types, so don't worry about this too much just now. But you see this 5 here in quotation marks, and then you see just the number 5. Just kind of based off looking at these two, do you know, or what do you think the difference between these two things would be? What's the difference between these two? What are your thoughts? Amazing. You're already beating me to it. You're just giving me the exact answer. Amazing. Yeah. So yes, so the technical term, or kind of like the Python related term, so exactly as you're all saying, this, as we see it in quotes, this means this is going to be string. So even though I see this as a 5, by putting it in quotes, you're telling Python, this is a character. This is a string. So it's going to treat it like it's a letter, essentially, some type of character. But if we're just calling 5, just the number without any quotes, this is going to be a numerical value. So this is going to be a number. So it's really helpful to know when you put something in your quotes, you're changing it to a different data type. If you want this 5 to have a value of 5 for mathematical calculations, you just call it as 5. If you want it to be, excuse me, as you all mentioned before, if you want it to be text or if you want it to be string, then you're going to put it in double quotes. So amazing. That was excellent. So we touched on this a bit with our variables. So our variables are going to be how we store information. And of course, like I mentioned before, we're not limited to just numbers. Our variables can hold text, aka string. Our variables can hold true, false values. Our variables can hold calculations as well. So this is just a storage for the data that you're using. So just like we see here, we can assign the value 5 to A. So we'll do this a bit later, kind of more neatly in our text box. But this is saying whenever you see A, this means I have the value 5. So A is storing the value 5. So just kind of to recap, don't worry, we're starting basic, but we're going to build off on this. Which is the variable in this instance? So looking here, what is going to be my variable? Amazing. Exactly. It's going to be A because it's the container. A is going to be the thing that is holding the value. Excellent. So then my value is what? And a bonus, what is the data type of my value? So what's my value and what is its data type? Excellent. Amazing. Yes. So my value is going to be 5. And I see kind of mixed responses, but they're both correct. So yes, this is an integer, but it's also a numeric value. Amazing. Okay, well done. So let's just do this in our terminal, just so we can see what happens. So you'll notice I'm going to type A equals 5. So you can type directly into your terminal here, and we're still going to be in our Python environment. So you see up here, when I type A equals 5, it doesn't do anything. It's actually not supposed to do anything because I'm assigning A the value 5. So it doesn't have anything to return. So just keep this in mind whenever you're assigning your variables some type of value. Unless you ask it to return that value, it's not going to give you anything. So let's figure out one way to actually get our variable value back. One way, and this is typically what I do. So one way is if you just type, not in terminal, but later on when we do this, you can type the print function. So if you're in our Python environment, so for me, if I'm in Python, if you just type A, it's going to be okay. But right now we're more in our terminal environment, so it's not happy with this. So we have a different function that is actually going to give us our returned value. I also saw a great question from Marie. So Python is case sensitive, but is it also case sensitive to spaces? So meaning A equals 5 or A equals 5 with a space. So yeah, that's a great question. So it's best to just not use spaces. So if you just have your A equals 5, but I like to do the experiment. So let's do A space equals space 5. And then you see it's upset. So it's not happy with this. But we'll later see if you're using IDEs, which we're going to mention in a moment, those are going to be a bit more friendly to kind of syntax that makes this a little bit more readable. So we will do this. Yes, so we're going to go in our Python terminal in one moment. So let's go ahead and switch here. So right now it's going to be a bit better because now we have our text box and we also have our terminal kind of split. So now we're actually going to jump into our Python terminal. Exactly. But in your normal terminal, you do have your variable assignments, which are okay. But we'll get to this a bit because we have some syntax that we need to do and that we need to understand to actually work with this. So, an excellent question as well. So the first thing before we kind of get into running our different codes is IDEs. I would recommend not worrying about this too much if you're just starting, because if you're just starting, you want to get more familiar with Python, its kind of language and its structure before you worry about IDEs. If you have more of a coding background and maybe you're already comfortable a bit with the environment and with coding, then IDEs are probably okay for you to move to. So IDEs are just going to be integrated development environments. So kind of like we saw in SQL, how if you made some type of mistakes, then you would see a red underline underneath your mistakes. This is what IDEs are really good for. They're great for helping you organize your code. They're great for helping you make it more readable, taking comments, taking notes. So it makes it more visually pleasing and easier to run your code. So some of these you might have heard of, like PyCharm, Spider. Those are some really common IDEs for Python. But of course, this text editor is just going to be what we start with, just to really get used to everything. So once you kind of get comfortable with it, and then you need something to help you make it a bit better or just make it prettier, then IDEs are definitely going to be for you. And amazing, some of you have already worked with some of them. So yeah, Spider is a really good one. Super cool. Okay, so we're just working right here. We're working in our text editor, and this is kind of the same as if you're typing in your notes on Microsoft or even typing in Word. It's going to be pretty much the same thing. This is just going to be plain text, which is okay. So let's go ahead and begin. One of the things that we need to do is when we're running Python, you see right here, so if you're looking right here, notice that this tab says code.py. So this is going to be the tab that is going to hold all of our Python commands. When you want to run this, then first you're going to type Python, and you have to type this exactly as you see it. So you have to type this tab exactly as you see it. Capitalization matters here. So if it's capitalized, you have to consider that as well. So if I have something here and I want to run it, then I have to type Python and make sure you spelled Python right, code.py. So it's not going to do anything right now because I don't have anything here. But when we do have our code, just make sure that you're running it like this. And another aside, just before we get started, as we do more of our kind of Python lessons, we're going to get more tabs. So just take a note and make sure that you're using the correct tab for your calculations, and always make sure that it's that one that you're running. So if this says duck.py instead, then I have to type Python space duck.py. Is that okay with everyone? Awesome. And then yes, this is the second page. Yeah, great question. What does the .py mean? So excellent question. This is telling us, or it's telling Python that this is a Python script that it can run. So whenever you have some Python code, you're going to save it as .py. So Python recognizes that it can run this script. So it's essentially telling Python, this is code that I'm running in Python. Look at this file and run it as if you're in the Python environment. So that's a great question. Amazing. Any other questions before we go to functions? And yes, how do you get a Python editor on your local machine? Yeah, so you can do a lot of different things. If you just have like a text editor, like if you have notes on your computer, what you can do is just anything that's like a text file. When you save it, you just save it as .py. And then in your terminal, you do exactly like this. You would do Python space code.py. If you want to be a bit more advanced, or if you want to have more readability, then you would go to these IDEs. So you would make these or not make, but you would download these integrated development environments so you can build your code a bit better. Of course, if you're using your computer, you also have to download Python. I think there are some instructions though at the very beginning on how to download Python, but it's not hard. Python, it'll kind of tell you which version that you need depending on your computer. And then you just have to choose which, yes. Then you just have to choose which kind of environment you want to run your code on. And yeah, another great question, can you practice on Jupyter? Yes, definitely. So Jupyter Lab is also a great way to kind of test different things. It's not quite an IDE. It's more kind of for experiments because you get to run your code a cell at a time. But it's great because you don't have to download anything. So everything's kind of already built in. Great questions. And I saw another question, is code.py an IDE? No, this is just a text editor, and we're just running our code off of this. So essentially, this is just like text, a text document, and we're ending it in .py to tell Python, hey, run this as if you're in a Python environment. So excellent questions. I love it. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our functions. So you're actually familiar with functions already because you've seen them in Excel, you've seen them in Tableau, you've seen them everywhere. So just like our favorite functions, index match, those are functions as well. So Python is also going to have functions, and essentially it's just a piece of code that is going to take some parameters and do something with it. So it's going to give you some result depending on specific inputs. So those inputs we have are going to be parameters. So the parameters are going to be what it is actually going to require. And then we also have the arguments. So we have arguments for the functions and we have our parameters. So the arguments more so are going to be your inputs, and the parameters are going to be restrictions on how you use your particular function. So the most common ones that we're going to start with are going to be print, type, and len. So I kind of told you already what print does, but thinking about Excel and thinking about kind of our other functions, what do you think len is going to do? What do you think len is going to do? Amazing. Yes. So len, it's actually not even limited to characters. So len is just going to count pretty much anything that you put in it. So we'll do more with len and we'll see kind of the application of len, but it's not just limited to characters. Len is going to tell you how many of something you have within something. So a little bit of a spoiler, type is going to tell us what data type that we have. So it's a good way to kind of double check or sanity check our functions to make sure that we have what we're looking for. So we remember we had our variable a. And before, when we were just typing in a directly in our terminal, my terminal is happy with it, but not everyone's terminal is. We have to have a function to actually display something. So display variables when we want them. This is what print is going to be for. So print is just going to take an input, pretty much whatever input you want it to be, and it's going to return that result. So it's going to show it to you in the terminal. So now we're finally getting a little bit into Python. So hopefully you can copy this much better than SQL by just clicking this. So when you click on the clipboard, I'm hoping that for you, it's just going to copy. And then you can hopefully paste. For me, I just do Control V, and now I have this here. So before we actually do this, let's kind of expect what this is going to do. So for this first part, what are we doing here? What are we doing with this a equals 5? Oh no, Sam, you can't paste. I'm sorry. I was hoping that this would fix everything, but I suppose not. I'm sorry about that. Exactly. Amazing. So we're assigning the value 5 to this variable a. Excellent. Now, with this line, what are we doing here? What are we doing with this next one? Exactly. So print whatever A is containing. So whatever A is holding, whatever value it's assigned, print this value. Excellent. So we also have some other things that we're printing. So notice that we can just put text directly in to print, and it can also print that too. It doesn't just have to be a variable, it can also be text. You might wonder, why in the world do we need to do that? But it's actually really helpful to do when you're building really, really long code and you need to have print statements to see, okay, where is my code running to? What step is it on right now? Especially because it's going to happen for you no matter what. The code is going to break. And if you have your print statements throughout your long script, you can figure out where it broke. So that helps you in debugging. So print statements actually have a lot of use. So now let's go ahead and run this function. So remember that this tab right here is called code.py. So to run this, first I type Python, then I type code.py. And now you see it's going to display up here in my terminal. So it's just running everything that I have down here. It's run that, and now it's put it in the terminal. So you see all that we had in our print statements are here. We have our variable 5, we have the text that we had with single quotes, and we also had the text that we had with double quotes. So single and double quotes really aren't going to matter here. So you see that they're producing the same result. Then if you just want to keep your terminal neat and tidy, so if you want to just kind of have a clean slate every time, just go ahead and type clear, and then it is gone. For me, I have like a mega kind of terminal window that's been going for like 3, 4 months, just because sometimes I like to kind of peek back to see what I did. But I don't recommend that because your computer might get a bit upset, just like mine. But clear is definitely going to help you. Okay. So, any questions before we move on to more functions? Everyone A-okay? Awesome. All good. Love to see it. All right. So we've already learned the print function now. And now what we're going to do is do the input function. So input is really handy, especially if you want to kind of build interactive code. So maybe you want your user to actually input something. This is actually what input is for. So you want their input to be assigned to a variable. You want the user to actually assign something. So we're going to see what happens with this. So I'm going to copy this here, and then I'm just going to paste it in our text editor. And so let's just make it a surprise. Let's talk through what happens by running this code. So remember, just like before, to run this, I type Python code.py. One shortcut is if you type up, then it's going to just show you the last thing that you ran. So that makes it a little faster for you if you're running kind of the same thing over and over again. So just keep that in mind, the up arrow, and then you can actually just keep hitting up forever. So until it gets to a stopping point. So you see, looking at this input, it's asking me, okay, what is my name? But notice I have a cursor here. So it's not printing this statement only, it is actually asking me for my input. So I'm going to go ahead and type my name. My quest is going to be data analytics, And my favorite color is blue. So now you see that input is going to allow the user to actually assign variables. So then once they assign variables, then you can kind of build code on top of this. So this is kind of a cool way to implement interactive code, but also if you're kind of building programs, this is going to be something that's almost always needed. And great question. So how can you stop the previous code to execute the new one? So unless you've accidentally gotten yourself into a for loop, it should stop automatically. But if you're stuck somewhere, then you're going to do Control C. So Control C is going to kind of just kill the script in your terminal. So that's one way to kind of stop it. It's a very hard stop though. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of just like an end task when you do that. Yep, Control C. So I don't think you're going to see an example here. Everything here is going to run to completion very quickly. So unless you made a mistake and it gets stuck somewhere, Control C shouldn't be applicable. But just in case for later, if you run this on your terminal, if you just do Control C, then it will stop it. Good question. Okay, so we've done a few functions. Now let's go ahead to our operators. And yeah, no, definitely. No, definitely the questions are welcome. Questions are always welcome. So definitely ask whenever you have them. And yes, so for what would we need this kind of script? That's another good question. So and it's kind of endless, but I'll give you a few examples. So if you're making some type of program, maybe if I'll give kind of an example from my background, or kind of my realm. So maybe you're trying to make a program that's detecting like the genes that you have, or maybe your genetic risk for a disease. If so, then you're going to need the user to have some type of inputs. So maybe you need their age. Maybe you need to know how many people in their family have blue eyes. Maybe you need to know how many people in their family have some type of disease. This would have to be your input. So if you allow this to be the input for the user, then you can automatically run a specific script. So you can run all of your mathematical calculations and then give them a result based upon what they've entered. So that's just one example. There are going to be a million others, but anything that you want the user to have some say in. So any type of interactive code. And yeah, so I'm sorry about the pasting. You should be able to paste. For me, I'm using Control V as well, like Kimmy's using. But yeah, if it's not working, I'm sorry about that. We're not typing too much, but we'll be typing some exercises, and those are going to be a lot shorter. So the exercises should be a bit better. So, and I'm just looking at, so I think trying not to take too much time to debug, but if you have an error, then that means you shouldn't have an error if you're copy and pasting directly. But I think it might be upset because you're pasting this part twice. So just make sure you just have this once because it might break the code. So make sure if you're trying this, you just have these print statements one time. Otherwise, something weird might happen. So awesome. Okay. Let's go to our operators. A lot of them you have already been using. So I think you're probably very familiar with addition. So if you want to add two numbers or two values together, and also a bit of a mini spoiler, this is not limited to numerical values. So for this, it's not limited to just numbers. We also have subtraction. So we're going to use our minus symbol as well, just like Excel and everything before. For multiplication, I think this should also be familiar. Make sure that you're using the star. Make sure you don't use the X, because remember, X is going to be a letter. That can be assigned as a variable. So this should always be star. For division, I think again, these 1, 2, 3, 4 should be pretty familiar from Excel. So remember, if you want to do A divided by B, go ahead and use this slash for division. That's going to be important. A couple of weird ones. I think this is the weirdest one. So this is actually modulo. So this you probably won't use very often, but I do want to explain what it is. So this is more for fractions. So modulo is going to give you the remainder. So for example, if you have 5 divided by 2. So 5 divided by 2 is going to be a decimal. Or actually, let's do this here so we see the full kind of, let's see all of it. So I'm going to have A. I'm going to assign A as 5. And then I'm going to assign B as 2. And then I'm going to assign C as A divided by B. Then I'm going to print C. So now, remember, I just have to run this code by doing this. So we know now that A was 5, B was 2, and A divided by B is going to be 2.5. This is because, just don't worry, it's just a very brief math intermission. So this is because 2 can only go into 5 twice. And not thinking about the decimal place, so 2 can only go into 5 twice, leaving a remainder of 1. Because 2 plus 2 is 4, and then we're trying to get to 5, so that's a remainder of 1. Does that make sense? It's tricky without the fractions. I can draw it too, just if it's confusing. Modulo is just weird in general, so I just want to make sure it's okay. Okay, I see a yes, clear. Okay, so yes, this is more to do with fractions. So it's more of a very niche kind of programmer tool that you use, but I still think it's important for you to understand it. So just in case, just to hammer it home, math is easy. Okay, amazing. So just to hammer it home, if I have 5, so I have 5 over 2, and then I know that this would be, of course, I ran out of room, but this would be 2 remainder 1. I'm not going to subject you to my writing. I'm going to type it, remainder 1. If you're going back to fraction land, this is just because 2 can only go into 5 twice. So 2 plus 2 is 4. And since we're trying to get to 5, we're just 1 away from 5. So modulo cares about that remainder. It's going to just give you whatever remainder you have in the realm of fractions. So it's going to figure out, based on your number, how many times does that number go into the other number that you've posed? So this time, how many times does B go into A? And then how far away from you are, or how far away are you from this first number? So again, 2 plus 2 is 4, and we're 1 away from 5, so we expect modulo to be 1. So let's go ahead and see. I know I've given you a lot of weird math things. Now, once I do this, let's test our logic. So to do modulo, it's just going to be this percentage symbol. So then, when I do this, you see I do, in fact, get 1. And again, that's just because I'm 1 away from 5. So my remainder is 1. So I'll give you one for you to try this time. So if I change this to 9, and then I change this to 3, and I say A modulo B, what do I expect to get? Awesome, amazing. You didn't even fall for the trick question. Well done. So exactly. And then we can just do a sanity check as well. So we get 0 because this 3 can go into 9 evenly. So there's no remainder. So then you get 0. Amazing. Okay, I know I'm sorry about the mini modulo detour. I just wanted to make sure that it makes sense. So are we okay with modulo? Even if you're not okay with it, please do let me know. I'm happy to explain. Yes, okay, definitely. I'll explain again. So let's do it once more with feeling, and then let me actually draw the fractions. And thank you so much for actually telling me to explain it again. You don't know how helpful that is, so I really appreciate you guys. So I have, let's do 10, and then let's do 4. So I have 10 over 4. How many times can 4 go into 10? How many times can 4 go into 10 evenly? Exactly. So because I have 4, I started with 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. So that's good because I haven't exceeded 10. If I add 4 again, I get 12. And that's too much. So that means it can only go in twice. Excellent. So I know that it can go twice. So twice. And then if I just multiply this by 4, then I know I get 8. So again, this is just saying 4 can only go into 10 2 times. And to get what that number is, it's just 4 plus 4. So knowing that 8 is the closest I can get without exceeding 10, what is my remainder going to be then? What's my remainder? Amazing. Exactly. So this is what modulo is doing. Modulo is just calculating your remainder. So it doesn't even really care about this part. It doesn't care too much about how many times this number is going into the larger number. It's just giving you this remainder. So now with this, we expect 10 modulo 4 to be 2, as you all have mentioned. So let's change this to 10 and 4. So we expect to see 2, and we do. So modulo is all about that remainder. So kind of think of it as fraction terms. What is the remainder that you have? Are we okay with modulo now? So I did see a question like, why do we even need this? Then yes, most likely you won't need it. It's more for kind of more experienced programming that you might need to know how many times X can go into Y, or maybe you need to know these different things to see how much is remaining, how much space are we going to have left once we compute this program, a lot of more advanced processing, things like this. So most of the time, you're not going to need it. But in case there's that Python test or that Python exam, and how are you going to do 10 modulo 4 in Python, you still want to know what modulo means. It's still going to be important. So if this is confusing, don't worry about this too much. This is only focusing on the remainder. So if you're dividing by something, you're dividing 10 by 4, what remainder are you going to have? How many numbers from 10 are you going to be away? So it's really more for just the remainder. So it's focusing on this remainder. So if it's still confusing, don't worry about this too much. You're not going to see it often. But if you still have questions after, happy to answer them. But just wanted to give you that aside because modulo is a bit weird. Okay, awesome. So exponentiation, I think, is a bit more familiar for what you've seen. So this is just going to be taking something to another power. So 2 to the 3rd power, 5 to the 10th power. This is just how you do it. So if we take 10 to the 4th power, it's going to be a huge number, but let's just make sure that this symbol works. So this is going to be 10 to the 4th power. So 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. And then if we do this, you'll see it here. So just helping you kind of know how to do all of these different operations, just so you have all the tools that you need. Okay, so gonna give you a modulo break and I'm gonna let you play around with this here. So I think this is short enough to where if you have to type it, I think you'll be okay with this. So just play around with this to understand one, making sure that you understand the Python syntax okay. So making sure you know that everything should be on its own line. We shouldn't have print statements on the same line because Python doesn't like that. Making sure you're comfortable with assigning your variables, and also making sure you're comfortable with these operations and you know what they mean. So just go ahead and try these, and then we will continue. And a great question. So how is Python useful, like SQL and Excel, to interpret large data sets? So this is just intro Python. We're going to get to a lot more, but Python has a lot of libraries that are going to manipulate data. So with Python, if you have a data set that's 2 million rows, and if you want to summarize a specific column in that data set, there is one function that's like one line of code that you can do that. If you want to do machine learning on a few different variables in your data set, Python can do that. If you want to transform all your data to a presence and absence table based upon specific features, you can do that. So Python is just super applicable because it has the power to do many different computational tasks on your data set very efficiently. So that's why it's really helpful for these big data sets. Okay. And I see another, so in the program outside of Codio, do we always need to repeat typing in Python code.py? Yeah, great question. So no, if you are using a text editor here, so if you're using a text editor, you would type in Python and then whatever you name this text editor. So you can name it whatever you like, as long as it doesn't have spaces, and then end it with .py. And so, for example, if I name this Intro to Python, if I named it something like, I'll show you. Assume I name this Intro to Python. If I did, I would do intro to python.py. That's how I would run this. So it's whatever you name this, whatever you call this file, that's what you should run it as. However, if you're just running everything in your terminal, which you could with Python, then you don't have to do this. You just run everything line by line by line, which is also okay. And yes, it has to end in .py. Great question. So this tab, we can't rename this tab, but if you're on your computer, then you just do save as, cool title here, .py. Great questions. Okay. Yep, excellent. Well done. Well done, Raya. All right. So I hinted to this a little bit, but before I actually give you an exercise to do, I'm sorry, Python's very exciting to me. So remember how I kind of hinted that plus is more than just for numbers. We can also use plus to concatenate. So remember Excel, we had a whole function just for kind of smushing together text and numbers. For Python, it is just the plus symbol. So let's look at this. In case you don't believe me, I'm just going to clear this. So we see I have a variable called sum text, and this is just string. Then I have more text, also a string. Now I'm adding the variables together. Even though these are not numbers, I'm adding them together. And let's see what happens. So remember, I'm looking at this tab, and I'm going to type Python code.py. And you see it concatenates both of the strings together. So not only is this addition, but if we're in the realm of strings, we can smush our strings together. We can concatenate them. So now let's give you some tasks to do. So I'll give you about 5 minutes for this. Go ahead and try exercise 2. So the first task you're going to do, assign the value a times b to a new variable and then name this multiplication result. assign the value a to the power of b to a new variable, and then print each variable. And for this, you can just choose whatever you like for a and b. It doesn't have to be any specific number. And then yes, so to run this, what you would do is, I'm looking here at what this is called. So I would do Python code.py, just making sure that I'm typing it exactly like this and making sure that Python is correctly spelled. And this one we're not going to rename. So in your own computer, you can rename it, but this we're not going to rename. So in your own computer, it would just be save as, and then you can change the name. Okay, let me give you some exercise music I always forget to share my sound. So I'll give you about 5 minutes, maybe less than that, if you don't need all the time. And of course, as always, if you have questions, please put them in live chat, even while we're working. That's totally fine. And then when you're done, feel free to post in live chat. And a great question from Mike. So how much Python should you know before learning data analysis? I would say just jump in. So learning on the go is good practice as well. So if you want to try it, then absolutely go for it. Amazing. So we'll do about 15 more seconds. See it all in live chat. And then Hassan, make sure you're spelling Python correctly. So it's not working just because Python is misspelled. Yes, Python's also case sensitive. So capital P won't work, but lowercase will, yes. Okay, let's go over this. So, of course, you could choose any number that you like. So the important part is assigning a value. So we can assign A, some number, whatever your favorite number is. Same with B, whatever number you'd like. So we've assigned A and B, and it's important for this to be at the top because you cannot do any calculations. So you can't do A times B without assigning them values first. So what we'll do is I'm going to copy this so I don't have to type it out, but we're going to assign the result for this. So we can actually just do the calculation here and assign this multiplication result. Then you see here we have our exponential result. and then we can directly assign that. So that's A double star B. So A to the B power. And now we have to print them. So we're just going to print them. So print multiplication result, and then print exponential result. And making sure to run this up here. So making sure it's lowercase, making sure Python spelled correctly, and then making sure that we're running code.py. And there we have it. And yes. So Marta, yes, we will get to that soon. So you are ahead of us. But yes, we will introduce how to print it in a string. There are a couple of different things you can do. You can use F strings, you can use a lot of different things, but we'll have a section just for that. And so Roya, so that would actually be different. So if you have this, if you did A, B equals exponential result, this is, I'm actually curious if Python lets you do this. Okay, yeah, so it doesn't like this because this can't be a variable. So you're giving this a calculation. So it's saying A to the power of B is getting this string value, which it can't. So you're trying to give two values to each other, and Python doesn't like that. So to do this, it can be on this side, that's fine, but you would just have to get rid of the string. So if it's like this, that would be okay. Yep, the double star just means exponential. So that means A to the power of B. So when I say that, I mean, oh, writing with this is hard. I'll just do capital. So A to the power of B. So it's like equivalent. If my example's here, this would be 29 to the 12th power. So that's what I mean. Awesome. Any other questions? Great questions. The typing, just want to make sure you're okay. Yes, if you want to get rid of this, then you just type clear and then it's gone. If you can't copy and paste, I'm not sure. I'm sorry about that. I think it's been kind of a bane for the entire cohort. We've just had random kind of instances where we can't copy and paste. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. If you did try clicking this and then using like Control V or Command V and that's not working, then I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Okay, so how about we go over just some variable name syntax before the break, and then after that, we'll give you that full break as usual. So I hinted to this a little bit, but I didn't go into it in detail. Python is a little nitpicky. There are some names that you cannot give in Python. So one of the things is you cannot include you cannot include numbers in your variable names. So you can't be kind of like your cool 12-year-old self by writing excellent like this. No, Python does not like that. So you have to make sure that your variables are just going to be letters. So we can't include the letters and numbers. So in addition to this, we cannot have spaces. So if I try to make a variable like cool variable name, and I try to do this, Python's going to yell at me and say, I don't know what you're doing. This is ridiculous. So I cannot have spaces in my variable. Instead, what we usually do, because it's still really good to be descriptive with your variables, especially if someone else is reading your code, and we will get to comments later on, don't worry. It's helpful to have underscores. I think underscores are going to be the consensus for everything. So you can just use an underscore if you want to break up different words. So now you'll see Python's going to be happy with that. So this is now accepted. So just make sure, don't use spaces. Python will get really mad. Also, don't use dashes because remember, the dash is how we subtract. So Python is going to be like, I don't know how to do cool minus variable minus name. And then why are you assigning it to? It's going to get really mad at me. So yes, remember, if you're going to separate your spaces, your best bet is the underscore. So underscore is our friend. So that's just is so you know. Another thing that is important is some of you have already discovered this. Python is case sensitive. So if I have cool variable name and cool variable name, these are different things. Even though the letters are the same, since this is a capital V, they are considered different variables. So to prove this to you, I will prove it. We love experiments here. So let's just show the statements. So if I'm telling the truth, then I should see a 2 and a 3. If these are the same, I should see, or yeah, this should just be overridden. So I shouldn't see 2 and 3. So you see that these are going to be different variables. So just keep this in mind, especially if you forget your capitalization, just try to be consistent and try to make it easy when you're using variables so you don't accidentally make mistakes and create kind of new variables overall. So just a recap of the Python happy and Python unhappy things. So this is fine here. So this is A-okay, all lowercase. All uppercase is fine. And then the mix is also okay. But again, keep in mind, these are all different variables. So if you have all of these in your script, they're going to be different. So that's kind of the danger here. Just remember that. Underscores are our friend. We love underscores in the Python world. They're great for separating words. And you can even have it in front. That's okay too. So you can have this as well. You can have the number at the end of your variable, but you can't have it like dispersed all throughout as we saw before. So adding a number to the end is okay. It's usually how we indicate maybe a different sequence, but it can't be dispersed throughout. So as you'll see here, we can't have this 2 first. This is confusing for Python. We can't have this dash because this looks like my minus var. So we can't have that. And then just spaces, never spaces. We can't have spaces in anything unless you are saying that you're starting something new. So maybe here we need a space because we're assigning a different variable or we're doing a different computational tool. That's fine, but never within a variable. So yes, exactly. So we can't start with a number just for our variables. Yes. So at the end, the 2 is okay. It's happy with that, but we can't have it at the start. Okay. Any questions before our break? And yes, Python has some built-in languages to its base function, but most of the ones that we are going to use are going to be imported. So we'll import a lot of handy functions, but it has thousands of hundreds of thousands of functions because people actually make these. So it's really applicable. So great question. Awesome. And then Kimmy's asking, can you have it in the middle? Let's test it. So we'll do test. And it is okay with that. So yep. So just none at the start. I wouldn't recommend this. I think this is just confusing, but having it at the end is fine. But I've never seen this in any code before. So yes, you can if you really, really want to. Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and take our 10-minute break and feel free to ask any questions in live chat if you still have them as usual. And I'll see you in 10 minutes. Jump back to Python. We've got a bit more to do. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm all for the ducks. Okay. So one other thing I would just like to tell you before we move on. So another thing that's important is if you have a variable, as you see here, we've assigned the value 5 to A. If you assign the same variable something else, it's going to replace it. It's not going to store the value somewhere. It's going to keep replacing the value. So if we run this, based upon what I've told you, well, I guess we'll see. If I actually got rid of these print statements here, if I only showed you this last print statement, what do you expect this to see? What do you expect this to return? Exactly. Excellent. And that's just because each time we're assigning a new value, we are going to override what it was before. So just keep this in mind and we can look at this. So I'll do the modified version where I only print this last statement. So you can see that it's going to be 12. And that's just because this is the last thing that we assigned A, and it's being overridden each time. So keep this in mind, and especially with our different variable rules. So now we've gone through a little bit about this, but let's just go through it just a little bit more to hammer this point home before we get to more of the data types and the structures. So as we saw, Python is going to be case sensitive. Even if I type Python code.py, it's like, I don't know what you mean. What is this? It's different. So remember, Python is case sensitive. Depending on what you capitalize, it has a different meaning. Another thing with this, we haven't quite looked into this as much, but every single line should only have one statement. So in other words, each line should only have one piece of code. By that, I mean we shouldn't be assigning multiple variables in the same line. We shouldn't be using multiple print statements in the same line. Every single line should have its own statement, its own string of code. So let's just look at this example that we have here. So notice that we have, how many different variables do we have here? Just double checking. How many different variables do you see in this block of code? Awesome, just quick sanity check. So we have our 3 different variables here, and we expect them all to produce 3 different results. And they'll produce these results quite happily. So again, just as a recap, to run this, what I'm doing is I'm typing Python and then code.py, then I'll just hit enter. So you'll see all of these are different variables, so that's why we're getting different results from our print statement. So this makes sense. Now, let's see what happens if we put print and keeping everything here. So instead of having print on different lines, let's see what happens if we have it like this. So what happens when you do this? When you do this, what do you see? What do you see? Yes, Python is not happy. So when we do this, it's like, no, I don't know what you're doing. You've got some weird syntax going on here. And Python is actually very smart, so it's telling you the type of error. So it's saying your syntax is not correct because I'm seeing multiple functions on the same line. And that's not good. Exactly as Marie said, computer says no. So to fix this, what would I need to do? How would we fix this? Break it. Yes, exactly. Yes, separate lines. A good question. So we can't actually separate it in this case with commas. We can later on combine things with F strings, but we can't kind of separate the print statements with commas. So what we have to do is make sure they're on separate lines. Excellent. So when we do this, you'll see our error goes away. Excellent work. Okay, this one you already told me the answer to, and we already did it, so well done. So, what if the code is long enough to not accommodate one line? That's a good question. So when you have this, we're in a text editor right now, but you can have text that will wrap around. Depending on the IDE or the text editor that you're using, it's still going to consider it one line, even if it's wrapping around to multiple lines. So the IDEs and the text editors, they're smart enough to kind of tell when you have one continuous line of code. Whereas if you have the same line of code with multiple functions, it can tell the difference between those. So that's a great question. So you don't have to worry about it being too long or anything. Okay. And yeah, another great question. So if you're just typing this directly into terminal, then you actually won't need to add it into lines because every time you're running a command, you're running it line by line. So on terminal, you're running everything individually. So you don't have to worry about this if you're putting them in line by line in terminal. Great question. Okay. So now this is your official introduction into Python. So go ahead and write a program that prints hello world using the print statement. This is like your crowning achievement of beginning Python. This is kind of the entry exam, I would say. So let's go ahead and do our first program, hello world. I'll just give you a minute for it, just so you don't feel rushed. Amazing. I love to see it. So this deserves a clean terminal. So to do this, we are going to use our handy dandy print statement. And if you assign this to a variable, that's great too. However you'd like to do it. So what you can do is print, and then I feel like this exclamation point is also very important. So hopefully you didn't forget that one too. So we're going to print hello world, and then we're going to run this, and there we have it. If you also did this, that's totally okay as well. So if you assigned A as hello world, that's okay too, and then just printed A, that's fine as well. You get the same thing. So, well done. This is your first intro to Python. You are officially now in it. So let's continue with our comments. So comments are important. I think Patrick was the one that mentioned this. It's like, please, can we have comments? So I'm not lost in my code like before in SQL. So that's a great point. And comments are important because they help you actually narrate what you're doing, especially if someone else that doesn't know you as well, or maybe just a colleague is reading through your code, it's important to have comments on what they mean. So the comments, what you're going to do is it can be anything you want it to be, but hopefully it's going to be explanations of your code, of what you're doing. Your comments are always going to start with the hash symbol. And notice how this actually turns green. And this is saying, this is a comment. This is not something I'm going to run. So each line, or like every time you go to a different line, you're going to need a new hash symbol. So again, these are really helpful for kind of telling the user what the program does or telling them what parameters are required. So this is a function that prints hello world. So this is kind of what the comments are helpful for. And you'll notice that if I run this, I'm not going to see the comments. This is just for your code. So just for visualization of your code to help you figure out what's going on in it overall, especially when you get to larger and larger chunks of code. So then just keep this in mind. Another thing is if you want to put them here, you can also put a comment here. So tell us what the input is. You can also put comments right after your functions or after your variable assignments. You can put them pretty much anywhere. They're here to help you notate and explain your code. So no, to my knowledge, there aren't going to be multi-line comments. So if you want to do multiple line, you do line 1 and then line 2. So you just have to start with this hash each time, but it's not too bad. A lot of times also to make it more visible, what you'll do is kind of just have this. So something that indicates like, this is a break, I'm telling you what I'm doing, and this is where it begins. So just keep in mind, your comments are going to begin with your hash symbols. They're not going to span to your different lines, so you'll just have to add new hash symbols every time you comment. This isn't going to be applicable if you're just working directly in your terminal. They're actually not going to be helpful for that anyway, because you're just running each command line by line. This is helpful if you're working in a text editor or an IDE, and you're trying to explain what your code is doing. So that's going to be better. Awesome. Okay. Now let's get to more things. All right, now let's get to data types. So we've gone over quite a lot of them. What are some of the data types that you know of? From what we've done so far, we've kind of gone through 2 data types at least so far. What are some of them? Oh, and then I saw another question. So no, you don't actually have to have this at the end. So just at the start, you're going to have your hash symbol. Exactly. Awesome. Yes. So what we've done is one of them, we've done numeric. So any type of number. And I actually see you're kind of going deeper into the types of numeric, which is awesome. So of course we have our different types of numeric. So we have integer, we have float, and we'll get into that a little bit in a few moments. And we also have string. So string is going to be things having to do with letters. So characters, words, text. That is going to be string. As we saw before, we can concatenate things together. So let's just look at this example, and you see it's nicely annotated here. So we're assigning the number 5 to this variable a, and then we're assigning this variable called complete sentence, this string right here. And now let's see what happens if we try to kind of squish together things of different data types. So let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm going to clear my terminal again. So again, just copying what I have right here. So if your copy isn't working, don't worry about this too much. And now we're going to run this. So Python code.py, and you see it is not happy. And just keep in mind, although the Python errors, they look a little bit scary, they're really helpful if you read them. So whenever you see like type error or syntax error, it's telling you the type of error that it's experiencing. So it's saying unsupported operand types, int and string. This is saying, no, we cannot add together an integer and a string. That is not what we can do. So these are really helpful explanations. So it's telling you the different data types you have and telling them, no, you cannot concatenate these. And yes, so for the string, it can be double quotes or single quotes, whichever you prefer. Okay, so some of you actually were jumping ahead as well with the integer, the float, and everything like this. So let's really figure out the differences. So our integer is going to be for both positive and negative numbers, and these are not going to have any decimal places. So we're just taking only the number. We're not using any decimal places after the number. So this is kind of what our integers are going to be. They're going to be like the clean numbers, no decimals. So let's see what happens when we type something without any decimals. Let's double check this here. So I'm just going to use this example, but you could really use this with any numbers of your choosing that don't have a decimal place. So let's go ahead and look at this. So we see we have this number here, and then we have this negative number. And type is going to tell you what data type that you have. So what is the data type that is assigned to my variable? So I'm going to try this here. And you see both of these are going to be integer. So that's excellent. Now, just keep this in mind. We're going to come back to this in a moment. We also have a numerical type that is float. So float is going to be a number that has extra decimal precision. So you can have these extra decimal places for multiple kind of precision. So normally this is just going to be 16 digits of precision. So you can have more decimal places afterwards, but you have some other kind of functions if you want even more than this, if you really, really want to. So notice that here, if I change this, if I add 0.1, let's see what happens to the type for A. So I added a 0.1 here, and now let's look at the type. You see now it turns into a float. Because I've added a decimal place to the end, it is no longer an integer, and now it is a float. So anything that has this decimal place at the end, that is going to be a float. If you don't have any decimal place and you just have kind of the clean number, that is going to be an integer. So just keep this in mind. Are we okay with the data types so far? So far we have our numerical data types. Within that kind of category, we go a little bit deeper. We have integer and we have float. And then our other separate category that we've talked about, we have string. Awesome. All right. So let's do a few more examples. So now let's work with our fractions. We had that modulo detour. Let's do a little bit of fractions, even though we're not going to use modulo anymore. So let's look at this. So we know that what type is B? What is the data type of B? And yes, we can change the data types, and we'll do that soon. Yes, excellent. So B is actually going to be integer, and it's integer because we don't see any decimal places here. Excellent. What about D? What is going to be the data type for D? Awesome. Yes, it's going to be float. Excellent. So now let's see what happens. Although these are both going to be numbers, let's see what happens if we multiply integer times float. So let me just keep clearing this. And you'll see we're going to get float. Even though this is minus 6.0, this is still considered float. And it's pretty clever because when you have an integer times float, to really keep all of the precision that you gain with float numbers, it's going to convert your number into a float. Regardless if you have this 0.0 or 0.122578, it's still going to turn it into a float to make sure you retain the precision. So integer times float equals float. Okay, amazing. I feel like string, you're pretty comfortable with. So just a reminder for your string, remember we can concatenate with our addition symbol. So we can not really add together. I don't want to say add, but we rather concatenate. We can concatenate two strings or even multiple strings together with our plus symbol. However, we cannot add or concatenate an integer with a string. That was the type error that we got. So we can't do this. So let's go ahead and look at len, just a reminder of our handy dandy function len. So remember that this is going to give us the length of whatever is in here. So you can also kind of nest functions like we saw in Excel. So remember first, or actually you tell me, what is this going to do? What is this function here going to do? Got our cocooning functions are back. Amazing. I see the answer is great, but what is it doing? Walk me through the steps of this. What is it going to do first? So what function is going to happen first? Excellent. Yes. So len, remember, is going to count whatever is in this variable. And this also works on compound data types. So first, it's going to count how many, in this case, characters are within more text. And then, exactly as you all mentioned, it's going to print that. So don't forget about your nested functions. Excellent. So now I forgot to copy this to confirm. And we see this is going to be 17 here. So great work. Oh, one thing, in case some of you said 9, remember with, this was actually the case in Excel as well, spaces count as characters. So remember that spaces also count as characters. Okay. Yes, so I'll explain this from the top. So what we're just doing here is I went over this a bit faster because I thought I think we've seen strings a lot, but I'll just explain it again in case. So you see we're assigning this variable. This is called, is this a string? We're just assigning string to this variable. And then we're asking Python, okay, what is this data type? Tell me the data type of this. We're doing the same thing here. So we have another variable, and then we are assigning it another string. So whenever you see quotes and assigning variables, whenever you see quotes, that is going to be a string. Even if there's a number inside, it's going to be a string whenever you have quotes. So here, what we're doing is we're squishing them together, we're concatenating them. So we're taking more text, which has, is this a string? We're taking even more text, which is seems it is, and we're concatenating this. So we expect final text to be, is this a string? Seems it is. We're printing final text, and then we're asking, what is the type? So this tells us that string plus string equals string. We don't have any changes there. Going for this function len, remember it's going to count how much you have of something. So how much you have within this variable more text. Well, if we look at more text, we see it's going to be this right here. So if I count this, I have 1, 2, 3, I can't tell how many spaces this is, but 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I have 17 because I'm also counting the spaces and I'm also counting the symbol. So everything within these quotes gets counted. So that's why we actually got 17 as a return, because first it counts what's in more text, and then it's going to print that result. And then, so it's your preference if you want to use single or double quotes. I tend to use single quotes just because it's faster. I don't have to hold shift, but it's really whatever is more clear to you. They'll do the same thing. And yeah, so if you reassign the same value to a different variable, it's going to overwrite. So it doesn't retain it. It's just going to keep whatever you have as the last assignment. So that's one thing that you should remember. We have some data structures that actually prevent reassignment, but we'll go over that, I think, maybe in 2 lessons. Okay, awesome. So Boolean, I also hinted at. So Boolean is just going to be your true false. So it's kind of like a light switch. Is it on or is it off? So Boolean, you'll notice that even if you just assign true, Python recognizes this is a Boolean value. Do not put quotations around this true if you want it to be a Boolean. Remember, as soon as you put quotes around it, it turns into a string. So true and false are just recognized by Python. You can just do that. But as soon as you put quotes around them, it turns into a string. So let's just test this. So we've assigned this Boolean variable true. We've assigned another one false. And now we're going to see what the type is. So remember, type is going to tell us, okay, what is the data type of my variable? When I do this, we get Boolean. So Boolean, it's really just true, false. So that's kind of what it means. True or false, kind of like our binary values. But in this case, it's just true, false. Remember, if I put a quote around, if I put quotes around it, it's going to turn into a string. So just keep this in mind. True and false are recognized by Python just normally. As soon as you put your quotes around them, they become string. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Are we okay so far? Any questions about our data types, about anything else we've gone over so far today? Awesome. Great. See more typing, just wait before we move on. Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and clear the terminal again and continue. So now we get to the combination and transformation of data types. I think it sounds intimidating, but it's not too bad. And I forget who asked this earlier, but someone was like, okay, we have a lot of variables, and what if I just want to put it in one print statement? How do I do this? This is how we do it. We have multiple different ways. So let's go ahead and look at this example. And you can choose your favorite way to use your print statement. So let's look at this first one. We have our A and we have B. So we're assigning A the value of 10. We're assigning B the value of 5. You'll notice here that we have our print statements and we have breaks in them. So I have my string, and this is my text. So the result of, and notice I have a comma here. And I don't have any quotes or anything around this A because I just want to print the value of the variable. So I'm using my quotes as like a placeholder for my variable. I'm telling Python, just give me the value of the variable here. So this is one way you can actually incorporate your variables into your print statements. One of three we're going to go over today. So I would say just choose your favorite one. Choose the one that's going to be most intuitive to you, because you're going to be the one writing all of your code. So you'll notice here again, then we go back to our string divided by, then we have our commas going to our variable. So we're going back and forth. So this is a way to introduce your variables as they are. And you notice we can do calculations in here too. We're having A divided by B. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like. And you see it's this nice statement all in one. So this conclusive or this cohesive print statement all in one. So this is our first method. We have our quotes. Whenever we want text, we just use our single quotes or our double quotes, whichever one. And when you want to introduce your variable, you use a comma. So you just interrupt your statement with commas and then place your variable. That is our first way. Now we have another one, of course. So yeah, why A divided by B? So ideally, you don't want to hard code anything. So these are variables that we've assigned. So we don't want to do the calculation ourselves. We want Python to do it. Because if we have an input or if we change our variable and if we put 2, then that's not good. This is not going to change everything. Every time we change our code, we're going to have to manually change this. Rather, if we have it just dynamic, as in calculated by these variables, then we only have to change our input. So that makes it a bit easier. Great question. So let's look at our other method. So let's look at this one. I'm just going to copy it and get rid of this one. So this one, I will admit it's a bit bulkier, but maybe you really like brackets. I don't know. Maybe brackets are your go-to. So here we still have our print statement, but notice I don't have any interruptions. I have placeholders. So my brackets are actually my placeholders for my variables. So you have to know where you're going to put in these variables in your print statement. And you see we have our print statement and our placeholders, and we conclude our print statements. Then we use our function format. So format is actually a function. You can actually indicate functions by saying dot, insert function here. We'll do this a bit more with Python later on, but format is a function. Within the format function, you'll see that we have all of the variables in order that you want them to be in your print statement. So this is assuming A is going to be here, B is going to be right here, and then A divided by B is going to be there. So you see that we have our placeholders with our brackets, and then format is telling Python, okay, here's what I want in the first position, here's what I want in the second, and then here's what I want in the third. So another option, if you like this one, again, it's really whatever you prefer. And you see we get the same thing, same result here. Now we'll have the F string. So this is very similar to format, but you'll notice we're putting the F right in front. So this allows us to actually, instead of using those brackets, we are putting the variables directly in the brackets. We're not using placeholders, we're putting them right in. So I think the F string is pretty common. I think honestly, for me, I think the first and the third are a bit more clean. I'm a little opposed to using the second one, but it's really up to you. So in looking at this, we have our F string in front. This is very important. You have to put your F string in front for this to work. So, and we're putting our variables directly in. So just making sure they're in brackets. And then you just have your print statement as normal. And to test this, we get the exact same thing. Okay, any questions on any of these methods for print? And which one's your favorite? Which one do you prefer the most? Oh, I see some first two. Okay. So, and what if you want to print multiple operations like print A divided by B, A times B? You could still do that. You just add more placeholders. So yeah, just add more placeholders and you could definitely do that. I see three, last one, first one. I think three is the winner right now. Oh, I think, yeah, I think F string's the winner with one a close second. I see F string the most. So F string I see the most. But honestly, it is whatever is most comfortable, you're most comfortable with, because people in the Python world are going to recognize any of these. So awesome. Okay. So yeah, I think it's nice to not have to type format. I agree. Okay. So this is just another example. So we can have kind of multiple combinations of different things. So we can change this to string here. So we can change our data type and then insert that into our print statement. So what I'll focus on more is this type and also this string. So we have a lot of different functions that can convert data types. So as you'll guess, this str is going to convert whatever is in here into a string. So let's just look at this. And you see we have 10 and 5. So normally this would be a number because we don't have any quotations anywhere near these numbers. They should be a number. However, we're using the string function and we're turning them into a string. So this is converting from integer into string. And we can double check that because we're checking the type of data that we have. This time we're using, so we can actually use some functions here. So you see, we can still use this with our string types. Those are still happily going to go into our function. So then we get our result with our print statement here. Oh, hey. So here we're essentially combining. We have a number here. We're still doing the operation of the number, and then we're converting it into a string. And here we're just displaying our different strings. So we're just building a sentence with this, essentially. Okay. I'll let you review kind of these other ones, but we do have a version for every kind of conversion. So we can turn our variables into an integer with the int function. So int will just turn anything it's able to into an integer. We also have our float. So float isn't here, but we can also convert to a float if you're able to. And this is going to be really helpful in the fact that we can't convert everything. So we cannot convert, unfortunately, John into an integer. That's just because it's not going to work. There are some things we can't convert no matter what. So integer or a string cannot become a number magically. That won't work. Same thing with float, because text cannot become numbers. Boolean can actually become numbers because they correspond to our on and off values or binary values. That would work. But mainly these strings are going to give you errors. And awesome, I see some of you have tried this already. Well done. So I'll let you transform these different data types because I just want to show you an introduction of how to group things together. Because you're going to see a lot of this later on. So I want to kind of give you a head start with this before you go into it. So as you'll know before, we have our variables that can hold one piece of information. We also have larger containers that can hold multiple pieces of data. One of your most common ones is going to be a list. So the list, we're going to notate with our brackets. So whenever you see brackets like this, know that is going to be a list. So you can have different things within your list. You can have string in your list. You can have Boolean values. You can have a combination of different data types. That is totally fine. So let's just look at this here. So what we're doing here is we're assigning the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to this thing called our list. So let's go ahead and do that. And let me just clear this here. So, and then we'll go ahead and print our list. So you'll see it's actually going to be in a list format. So remember, the brackets are going to tell us, okay, this is all within a list. We can have, like I mentioned, different data types within the same list. So we have a Boolean, we have a string, we have a float, and we have an integer. And they can happily be within the same list. So you see that this can happen as well. You'll learn more about this next lesson, but the good thing with lists is we can call the different things in the list by their positions. So if I want to know what's the first position of the list, what I can do is I can say print another list 0. So give me the first position of another list. Python's a little bit weird and it starts at the 0 position. So really remember that. That's really, really important. 0 is the first position for Python. So it's a 0-based index. Keep that in mind. So when I do this, you see it's going to print true because this is the first position in my list. So really remember that. Dictionaries, you're going to learn a lot more about, but I'll give you just an introduction. Dictionaries you can call by their key values. So here, this is going to be more helpful for you. We are assigning this dictionary the name player number. The key is going to be how we call the dictionary. So it makes it easier to organize because we can call it based on a key. Then from the key, you have all of your different values. So the dictionary can have multiple keys, and within each key, you can have multiple different values or items. So literally, like the pages of your dictionary, if you're looking up a word and you see the word, you see the definition, and then you see all the synonyms. This is kind of like our Python dictionary. We have our key, which is how you're going to call or reference this, and then you have the values. So if it doesn't make too much sense now, don't worry, because you're going to have a lot later on with dictionaries. But just keep in mind, the values it can hold can also be lists, can also be dictionaries, can also be numbers. So dictionaries can hold a lot of information. Okay, so I just wanted to give you this notation. This is just going to be quickly how we actually call a dictionary. Curly brackets are going to be how you begin your dictionary. And another thing is when you see curly brackets in the combination of quotes, that's most likely going to be a dictionary. Because we have this here, I have my curly brackets, and then I have my key. So keep this in mind. You'll go through this more next time, but I just wanted to get you started. So well done, everyone. It's your very first day of Python completed. Hello World is all done, and I wish you luck on your Python journey.